And we're back with another one for you from the mandatory. Lots to get into because we just had an epic fight on the weekend. Caleb Plant lost to David Benavidez, and that brought up some questions, Bryan. He called out Canelo Alvarez. Okay, that's the fight we all want to see in September. And my big question to you is, number one, do you think we're gonna get it? And number two, how big would this fight be with Canelo Alvarez and David Benavidez?
And also, like, stylistically, does he have a chance? I feel like it's something we're also going to get to in a little bit. But yeah, look, for one, his performance against Caleb Plant, wow, he did not get the knockout we predicted. I blame Kenny Bayless wholeheartedly on that. Too much cock blocking from the referee. Didn't enjoy that. Should have let them fight more. And I think if he did, David Benavidez probably stops him in like the 11th round. There was an opening in the 9th that we were talking about, we were texting during the fight, that he really was pouring it on. And then Kenny Bayless just kind of stepped in. And I think with Canelo Alvarez, like, this would be a massive, massive fight because I don't know how many pay-per-view buys this fight did. I don't think that's been announced or verified yet. There's speculation as to how much the numbers are, but none of it's real yet because in boxing, a lot of shit is bullshit. Like, we know this. But
Lou told us never to look at the numbers.
Yeah, right. Lou Bella did say that when he was on here. But regarding like how big the fight was, it dwarfed Jose Ramirez and Richard Coleman, which was on ESPN that same night. And it stood out and trended. And a lot of people were paying attention to it that don't always tweet about fights. So it did reach more casual observers than even I was expecting, right? I'm not sure how many people paid for it. We still got to find that out. But it was a big fight. And that's really to say that David Benavidez' next fight is going to be under a microscope, especially if it's going to be against a Canelo Alvarez. So I think it'll be a huge fight, Shantelle. What do you think?
I think it'd be a huge fight, especially if it's on a Mexican Independence weekend, right? Like, that's what we want to see. Two Mexicans go at it, one Mexican American, and then, of course, you got Canelo Alvarez. I think that's a great fight. I think that's a fight that we need in boxing. And you talked about it, like, stylistically, how does it match up? We go back to Canelo Alvarez and how he got Caleb Plant up and out of there in the 11th round. And then you got David Benavidez, and you make a great point because I was pissed off during the fight. I was like, what is the ref doing? Because David Benavidez had a chance in the 9th.
Yeah. There
was just a whole bunch of other stuff that was going on. The fight got, put on pause, and he's like, check this head, but it wasn't even an issue. And I'm like, well, what is going on here? The ref was way too involved in this fight. Sometimes you just got to let the guys fight.
Yeah.
And that's what I think kind of got taken away from this bout, because I think if the ref just let them go, we would have seen a knockout, because there were a few times where Plant was definitely hurt. And throughout this fight, I was like, man, I'm going on Twitter. I'm seeing people that I never really see tweet about boxing, tweet about this fight. So that's how big it was. And so if we got David Benavidez and Canelo, I think that would be absolutely massive. Now, do we get it? Because we know that Canelo is going to fight John Ryder, and then he wants the rematch against Bivol. And we all kind of know how that might go. Not to sleep on Canelo, but I think we've seen Canelo do so many amazing things in so many weight classes, and I think he just went too far and above into a weight class where it's going to be a tough fight for him, and I think it's going to go the exact same way. And also, what would another loss for Canelo do? And I know it's like L's on people's records. Like, one of his L's is Mayweather. Come on, right? Yeah. Canelo was really young during that time, and we know how good Money Mayweather is. But I think everyone kind of wants that O on their record. But what does another loss do for Canelo? Also, it's like, I think David Benavidez is the bigger pay-per-view fight. Like, it's a blockbuster fight, especially if it happens in September. I don't think it's going to happen in September, though, because David Benavidez also has another path as well. Might fight David Morrell and then a Charlo brother. That's what might happen. And we know that Canelo is like, yo, I want to, take on John Ryder, and we expect him to beat John Ryder. Yeah. And then he wants the rematch. So that's what we're probably going to get, even though the Benavidez fight is probably an easier fight to make. What do you think about this, Bryan? Like, do you think we're going to get it, or are these guys going to go separate ways and then we possibly get it in 2024?
It's boxing, so I don't think we get it in September, but I hope we do, right? Like, David Benavidez, to his credit, he did say, like, you know, I respect Canelo, but he got to give me that shot. This is what we want to see in September, right? And ultimately, I think that this is a fight that people would want to see more than anything else, more than David Morrell being in the mix, even more than David Benavidez taking on Jamal Charlo.
I think that's a good fight, though. But is it going to happen, though? That's the thing, right?
I'd like to see Jamal Charlo fight anybody because he hasn't been in the ring in a long time, right? Both Charlo twins, like we want to see them back, period. Not sure your welcome back fight should be against David Benavidez coming off beating Caleb Plant. And as we said, probably should have stopped him. Shout out to Caleb Plant's toughness, though. Like that's something to be commended in all of this, right? Caleb Plant made it to the end, boxed well in the beginning, and kind of like the Canelo fight late. But you mentioned the losses on Canelo's record. He has 2. I would argue he has 4.
Yeah, you know, I think Triple G got robbed.
Triple G, the first one, and Erislandy Lara. I'm not letting go of that one, right? So, but still, like Canelo's awesome, pound for pound king at one point. I still think he's pound for pound top, you know, 5, 6, something like that. I got to think about like what my ranking would be, which we'll do on the show at some point. But you know, Canelo Alvarez is still that dude. And I think that when you're sizing up this matchup in particular with David Benavidez, can David Benavidez beat him? Is sort of what we posted in our community poll on our YouTube feed. And honestly, I think this is a legit fight for Canelo Alvarez, who didn't look great last year, right? Like he lost to Dmitry Bivol. It wasn't that close. And then the Gennady Golovkin fight, he dominated an older Golovkin early on and then faded late. And Golovkin, remember, took over the fight for the last like few rounds or so. Like it wasn't that close. And I mean, like it wasn't that close, but at the same time, Canelo Alvarez, I felt like could have been stronger at the end of that fight. He's been a professional for what, 18 years at this point?
Dude, his record is crazy. Like, look at how many fights he's been in. Also, he was dealing with a nagging injury that we found out later on too, right? Which is why he kind of took that time off. I'm not making excuses for Canelo, but I just think there was also a lot of times in that fight where I'm like, Benavidez wants to fight Canelo. You know what I mean? Like,
I see. No, but
at some point, I'm like, I don't know if Benavidez knows what he's getting himself into fighting a guy like Canelo. Because Canelo has so much experience in the ring. And I would take Canelo over David Benavidez. I think also if he fought David Benavidez and won, I think Canelo could just retire off into the sunset and be like, yo, I've literally done everything.
So look, Canelo Alvarez is 32. He's going to be 33 in July. And probably an older 33 because he has over 60 pro fights in his career. And again, he turned pro at like 15 in like 2005, right? Like this is so many generations. We were still wearing baggy clothes and shit. #1 song in the country was like maybe Back Then by Mike Jones. Like this is a long fucking time ago when Canelo Alvarez turned pro, right? Like, and to me, he can't win forever. I still favor him in that fight. I think he'll be a favorite 3-1, 4-1, something like that. Not like super crazy like Anthony Joshua. We're talking about him later this week, actually later this episode a little bit. Minus 1,200 to beat Jermaine Franklin. I think I've seen at one point. I don't think Canelo versus Benavidez is going to be that. But what I do think is that David Benavidez kind of fits the profile of a guy who can beat Canelo Alvarez, where he's younger, he's bigger, he's stronger. I'm not sure he's faster, but he's fast. Defensively, Canelo is obviously better, but David Benavidez being the pressure fighter he is, I also think Canelo Alvarez is going to entertain him more than Caleb Plant did. Caleb Plant was boxing and things of that nature. Canelo Alvarez probably should have did that against Dmitry Bivol. He did not. I don't think he's going to do that against David Benavidez, and I think it's going to be more of a fight than people expect. And I would entertain the possibility of David Benavidez winning that fight, though I'd probably cowered out and lean toward Canelo Alvarez because he's freaking Canelo Alvarez. But I think it's not a 50-50 fight, but it's closer than I think public consensus would let you believe.
Here's the thing. I actually think it could be a 50-50 fight because David Benavidez is the younger guy. We see the way that he fights on his record, doesn't have a blemish. And I think Canelo in that weight class, he has to fight Benavidez. Like there's two guys that I think Canelo hasn't fought yet where people are like, why didn't you fight yet? Which is a Charlo brother. And then also Benavidez, right? Because we didn't expect him to move up and then go fight Bivol and lose. We didn't expect him to do that. In fact, going into that fight, he was a favorite. And of course, because he was like cleaning out divisions. And I just go back to the fight where Canelo what he did to Plant was break him down round by round. We saw that. Benavidez is supposed to break down Caleb Plant round by round, but he couldn't do it. The ref also had a little bit to do with that. But I think it's a 50-50 fight. But I also think, what happens if Canelo loses to David Benavidez? Then what does that say about his legacy? Because I think if he takes this fight with Benavidez later on, I don't think it's going to happen this year, possibly 2024, maybe Cinco de Mayo weekend, something like that. But if he lost to David Benavidez, then what would that mean for his career? Because I think if he won, like I mentioned, he could retire and be like, peace out. Like, I've done everything. Look at my record. I'm one of the greatest of all time. And I think he could do that. But I think if he takes a loss to either, like, if he takes another L against Bivol, what are we going to say? And if he takes an L against David Benavidez, then what are we going to say about that? You know what I mean? I think Canelo, everything that he's put into this sport, everyone that he's fought, like, listen, man, he fought Billy Joe Saunders, right? He fought Caleb Plant. He fought Callum Smith. Like, he fought these dudes. Mm-hmm. And he was victorious in those fights. So we're not used to seeing Canelo lose at all. And when he does, we're just like, whoa. But I don't think he loses against a guy like David Benavidez, because there are some points in that fight where I'm like, this guy wants Canelo. And I think Canelo could really do some damage on him at some points in this fight. I'm not sleeping on David Benavidez because I really think it's actually a 50-50 fight. But I think there's a lot riding on it. And maybe that's another reason why Canelo, not saying that Canelo's ducking him. I don't think Canelo ducks anybody. He's Canelo Alvarez. But I do think he needs to take care of Benavidez, and I do think he needs to fight a Charlo brother.